Welcome back, everyone. Welcome, Deacon. So we are ripping along this series, and it's so fun for me. I don't exactly know where we're going, so I'm getting this adventurous along, right alongside everybody else. So in the last conversation, we just covered the fact that a lot of us, especially let's say in the West, maybe the first world West, I don't know, but we have lost an aspect, one very critical aspect of what it means to be a human being at all. We're made up of these three components, and what we've done is we got rid of one and then we split another one in two parts, and then we don't pay attention to anything. And you're advocating we need to get back this sense that we covered in the last conversation. The body mind is a single unit, then there's this soul, and then there's the spirit. And when all three are cultivated, are developed, or are synergized, or work together from this state of maturity, of collaboration, then we're able to enter into the second part of the path, which I think is this conversation. So please take it away.
Yeah. So just to clarify, and again, this is something that I think other people can help to develop the language for, because I think this will uncover something for a lot of people that they didn't realize that they needed. It certainly did for me. So this isn't me standing on top of a high hill and preaching at people. This is me being a Sherpa. This is me being
We're standing
Aragorn,
on the
not
shoulders of
Gandalf.
the great dorks of the past, and fathers, I should say, and great people of the past.
So just so we're clear, I'm not speaking out of some great insight. I think that what I'm talking about here is going to be useful for a lot of people, but I'm also cognizant of the fact that there probably are ways of talking about this that people are going to help me with in the future that might even simplify it or might make it better. So I do, like I said in the last video, I want this to be a call for collaboration, a call for community, and we'll talk about how that can happen in a bit. But I think it's important that all of us really drill into this process, how it works, because I think it will unlock and uncover something inside of us that can really help us become better artists. So if the first part of the twofold path is about becoming a capable human, the second part cannot happen unless we've started the first. Now, there is a temptation here, and I think this is a particularly Christian temptation, to never go past the first path, because the first path does not have a destination. It is an ongoing process that we will be working on for the rest of our lives. And too much of the language of self-help and pop psychology in our world assumes incorrectly, whether or not it actually assumes, it speaks of it in this way as though it were possible, that there were some kind of final destination where you become a whole person, a complete human. And it does sound, when you listen to a lot of these talking heads, forgive me, that they simply don't live or don't consider the reality of us being fallen humans, which means that there is no perfect endpoint, at least in this life. All we can do is set out on the path. And there actually is a lot of freedom to this, because it means that you don't need to worry about reaching any sort of special status before you can start becoming or cultivating your craft. You just need to take the step. This is a point that the wonderful Russian philosopher Ivan Ilyin makes in a book that I translated called Foundations of Christian Culture, where he says you take the step, and that is enough. Because as long as, and you can even fall off the road, so to speak, you can trip, you can get into the weeds. The point is getting back and continuing. That's possible. So I just want to make that very clear. If what I said in the last video sounds like the entire enough work for an entire lifetime, yes, that's the point.
You're right.
It's okay though, because by simply focusing on it and doing it, we are already in it, and we are already, by doing that, it is a call to the divine for help, and as we know, he answers very, very quickly. So then step 2, we have not reached the end of step 1. We are simply now walking on two paths simultaneously. How is this possible? Well, I told you,
Welcome
the
to the
metaphor needs a little bit of work.
Yeah.
This is where we actually begin the process of cultivation. And cultivation, I love that word. You think of gardens, you think of an ongoing cyclical process that has seasons, that can have seasons that are fruitful. It can have seasons that are fallow. And the fruitful season can be very fruitful, it can be not so fruitful. And sometimes that has nothing to do with you. It has to do with things like weather, it has to do with things like rain, it has to do with things like, well, in this metaphor, let's say it's your life circumstances or
The
how many
ground you
children you have.
inherited that you had no control over.
That's right. Yeah. It could be disease, it could be all kinds of things. So
Mm-hmm.
cultivation here means a deepening
Uh-huh.
of the process of the first path, where you continue to work on the basics of the first path, which is discipline, which is um, cultivating taste, which is engaging in the creative act as a
Mm-hmm.
kind of act of humility, as a kind of calling out towards synergy, as a desire for the creator to work with you. But in the next step, as we go deeper, we are talking about cultivation. We're talking about taking it to another level. And here is where we talk about things like in the body mind thing. We are no longer focused purely on the act of discipline, but we are now thinking about things like controlling our time, controlling our energy. This
Mm-hmm.
is where you get into the weeds about how you might um, structure your day, how you might structure your week, how you might structure a quarter of a year, how the rhythm of the week has to correspond with the rhythm of your own personal spiritual life as well as the rhythm of the church's spiritual life.
Mm-hmm.
And here is where things get dicey, because as soon as you start to apply an element of control, you are uh, getting into a dangerous area where the control might become the thing itself. And you might
Mm-hmm.
think that in the control is the act of creativity. And of course, it isn't. So, this is where it becomes very much a cooperation, where you start to exert a bit of measure of control over the realities of your process. But you very actively keep a humble mind to the realities that this may not be the best idea. And I simply have to keep trying and keep trying and keep trying. And this is where it really gets this second path is much more difficult to define, because it has very much to do with the particular details of your process in your life, your creative life. And that's how it should be, because every single human is going to have a slightly different nuance to this second path.
Mm-hmm.
But if we manage to exert some level of control, which again is accessing the body mind part of the human, but at a deeper level than the first path, then we can think about doing the dangerous thing, which is not just cultivating taste, but expanding it and going into places that are perhaps dangerous, or things that our parents told us we should never read, we should never listen to, we should never consider. And this is dangerous. This has to do with trying to find pearls or flowers in the wilderness, roses in the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
And you should not do this until you've at least started embarking on the first path of becoming a capable human being,
Mm-hmm.
because it is absolutely a fact. And there are plenty of wonderful church fathers who will attest to this, that what we put inside ourselves has a very, very clear effect on our body, mind, soul, and spirit. So, what we put in, if we don't have the proper filters up, can affect us in ways that we will not necessarily immediately see or feel. And it could have the kind of effect that it could rot us from within. But that shouldn't make us fear the process of leaving the comforts of home and going out into the wilderness, because that's where the battle is fought and that's where the treasures are found. That's where the hero's journey must lead us as questers into the land of stories, so to speak. And finally, this should lead us to a place where we come to the act of creation, not simply, although it's not simple, but not simply as an acceptance of the synergy between small c creator and large c creator, but already a place where you are crafting something. And that means that you are aware of the things that you do, and you make specific choices in terms of genre, in terms of style, in terms of word choice, in terms of sentence choice. You see how a lot of the stuff that people focus on is the stuff that's on the second path, especially
Mm-hmm.
in the typical kind of literature or the courses that teach you how to be the best, etc. They're always focusing on the details of the second path.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people fail because these things can only be layered on top of a basic level of human competence.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't do enough work on establishing that level first, or at least engaging in that level first. So that's why I think it's very important simply to bring to our attention the fact that if you want to be doing things like becoming a a writer who writes deeply, a writer who is engaging in his craft in a way that the craft doesn't happen to him, but he happens to it or she happens to it. That is a stage that we have to grow towards, and it's going to take time. And when you get there, and when you start to sense, when you start to really see the fruits of that kind of creativity, you see that this is something that you can engage in for a whole lifetime. And this is something that you can sacrifice a lifetime towards, and it will never become stale. And it will only become greater and greater as long as you continue cyclically to travel both paths simultaneously.
So a metaphor that I'm hearing is very Bilbo-Weasian, where the mere fact of him stepping out on the adventure is following the first path, where it's the beginning of that cultivation of himself by pitting himself against all of the series of adventures that he ends into, knowing that there is an ultimate goal of there's some massive thing that I have to level up for and prepare myself for, but airdropping yourself straight into that situation would absolutely destroy him because he's not developed any sense of confidence, competence, self-awareness.
Yep.
He's only able to be the kind of Bilbo who can carry the climax because he's endured all the adventures. But at the same time, that's the first path, is just stepping out and starting in motion. And then can you recap again the second path and how that's slightly distinct? The second path,
The
you said,
second
is
path is a deepening of the first. So we still have, we're still working on the same parts of the human person as we were in the first path, but we're deepening each one of them. So if the first, if the body mind on the first path is all about discipline, then the second path is about control. It's about being able to actually use that discipline to create a system that you can repeat. If talking about soul, we're growing from simply acknowledging that taste is a reality to actually cultivating and developing that taste by going off into directions and into areas that we might have been afraid to and should have been afraid to before.
Right.
So if we're and then the final thing, of course, is the mastery. It's what you receive after you give the Arkenstone to Gandalf, and you receive a kind of blessing through that act of abandonment. And Bilbo becomes this greatly rich person as a result of him giving away this wealth. So if we're continuing this metaphor of the hero's journey, Bilbo's journey, the journey never ends, is the point. And even within the structure of the hero's journey, the cycle repeats. There's a continuous try-fail sequence that happens to the hero, where he thinks that he's gone through the whole process. I've seen the disaster, I've overcome it, I'm the hero. And then there's another thing that makes him realize that actually that's only step one. You have to keep going. So that's why there's so much similarity between the two of them, and it's almost like it's the same road.
But it's like the second,
in a slightly different dimension.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like a spiral. It's not a circle where you completely come back to step one. It's like a spiral. You do return to step one, but now you're at a higher vantage point of that. And so as he
you're
goes
always moving
through,
forward. You're always moving up, or you're always moving forward.
there's always actual progress. It's not just cyclical. Yeah.
That's right.
So with him, as he enters, he just begins the process of entering in this journey, but he's not the same Bilbo from at the end of the story. He's not the same as he was at the beginning.
He's not the same Bilbo at the end of each of those little mini journeys as well. At each point, he becomes more fully himself.
And that feeds right back into the first path, which is now I've incorporated a new experience or a new idea or a new reality. Now I have to integrate that. And then with all of that, now throw myself into a new thing. So I think this is a perfect segue into our next one, which is part 4, becoming a competent human, which sounds like where I'm trying to describe. And I think you're going to just take it away. So we'll do that in just a moment.
All right.